This is Patsy with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book, especially a book written years and years and years ago. And Michael Hoffen is going to tell us all about it because he is a scribe and an award-winning author. Oh, it's so wonderful to have you back, Michael. It's just so great. Isn't it
Thank
nice
you.
to be called a scribe? You're a scribe.
It is a title. It's never a title I thought I would get when I was growing up.
Well, when you were growing up. How old are you now?
I'm 17. I'm going to turn 18 this March.
Oh my. Okay. Yeah, when you grow up. That's it. Well, so, let's talk a little bit about this whole idea of you being an award winner in your first book at your age. You've gotten a lot of recognition. You must be so proud.
I am very proud. Yes. I mean, it feels like such an accomplishment to win all these awards. Even if the book had never won the awards or had never been published, even I feel like I still would have felt accomplished for writing it. But the awards have really magnified my experience of accomplishment 1,000 times over.
So do you want to tell us?
So I've won the Pencraft Book Award for Literary Excellence, the Story Trade Book Award, and then the Nonfiction Authors Association Gold Award.
Wow.
And many of those, some of those awards I've won in the middle grade category.
Well, this is fantastic. I mean, it's such a wonderful accomplishment, and the book is so beautiful. As I said when you were on before, that it became one of my favorite books. It's really my go-to book for giving gifts because I can give this to anybody because everybody loves this book. And Be a Scribe it's one of those books that I know when people get it, they will not give it away because you can go back to it so many times. So let's talk a little bit about, well, you got the idea. Well, first of all, how did you get the idea to study Egypt? Well, actually, you're from New York, so you spent a lot of time in the museum, right? And learning about Egypt from a young age.
Yes, no, as a kid, I used to love to go to the Met, which is not too far away. I live in Manhattan, so just walking into the Temple of Dendur and seeing the grand temple, it's something that you can't quite forget, even if you've only gone there once. And I used to go there many times, so it's really fastened itself in my memory.
So how did you come across this? Did you come across this story first?
How did it come about? So it came about. It was during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I was in 7th grade at the time when it started, and I didn't have much to do, to be honest, and so I was getting a bit bored. So I decided to start learning hieroglyphs, and the reason I chose hieroglyphs actually was I was planning on taking a summer course at Brown on hieroglyphs the summer of 2020, but of course it was canceled, and so I asked the professor who was going to teach it. Christian Khety, he's one of my co-authors, and whether he would teach me hieroglyphs, and he said yes, and then I started learning hieroglyphs, and after about a year or so, during the summer of 2021, I began translating the story, and it was Jen who originally suggested the story, but it's such a wonderful fit for the book because it goes through all the different. Actually, I'll just talk about what this story is about for a little bit. So it's about a father and a son. And the father is taking his son down the Nile to the capital of Egypt to train so that his son can enroll in scribal school and become a scribe. And along the way, his father is telling his son about all the other jobs that his son could have if he doesn't get to become a scribe. And you'll see a few of those jobs, I think, later in the interview. But some of the he says you might be a fisherman or you might be a potter. And then he denigrates all those jobs, and he says those jobs are the worst in the world. You should never want them, but you should want to become a scribe. You should study very hard. And so it's quite a funny text because at times he exaggerates quite a bit, and he says the fisherman, he has to share his income with crocodiles, and the crocodiles are always in danger. He's always in danger of being eaten by the crocodiles. And then at the end of the story, he gives his son some wisdom to navigate life in the capital because his son, the father's a miner. And so his son, his name's Khety, and the son's name is Pepi, and so you can imagine coming from the hinterlands of Egypt and now then going to the capital, his son might be in for a bit of a shock. So his father's trying to help him navigate that. And it's quite a wonderful pick because with each of the jobs, and you'll see this in a bit, but you can show images of what it must have been like to actually do those jobs without Khety's exaggeration.
It is absolutely delightful. The story is delightful, and that's why I wanted to really blow the cover up so that we could see it, because it's just beautifully done, and we can see all the different jobs here. And you're right, it's very funny the way the father wants to make sure the kid becomes a scribe. And I love, isn't it wonderful that his name is Pepi, which is actually a name that a kid might have today. Well, at least maybe a kid who goes to prep school, they love to use nicknames, So it's a kind of name that actually might be a modern name.
Yes. I mean, I've never heard of a kid named Pepi, but I could see maybe someone using something like that. Like,
oh, they have Binky. They call girls Binky and all of those silly names in prep school. So I think maybe now somebody's going to name their kid Pepi just for fun.
Just for fun, yes.
Maybe you'll do that one day.
Maybe, I'm not sure. It's actually interesting. And when I first started translating the story, I don't think this is true, of course, but Pepi was actually the name of a king I believe he was a king in the Middle Kingdom, and so there's a debate. It's not really a debate though. Most Egyptologists don't think so, but there's a potential debate that maybe he was trying to say, oh, and this Pepi, who was the son of the miner, became trained to be a scribe and eventually became the vizier, or maybe even the pharaoh. And so this is what happens if you work hard and you study hard. But of course, it's all unclear. It's a bit like if someone wrote a story about Abraham Lincoln's childhood or something like that.
And now this photo here, is that the text that you translated?
That's one page of the text, correct? Yeah, that's from the Papyrus Cellier, and it's currently in the British Museum. You can go there right now and you can see it on display. And actually, I'm not sure if it might be on display. It was on display at some previous point, but you can see that that's one. I think it might be the second or third page from the text, and it's written right to left.
And you can read that.
No. I can't. I can read the hieroglyphs. This is hieratic, so it's a bit like when you see the hieroglyphs on the stone walls. That's hieroglyphs, and I can read that. But when you see this is hieratic, so it's like a cursive form of English. So, for example, with cursive English too, I was never really taught it that well. They don't teach it nowadays, and so it's quite hard for me to. I mean, I can understand some of it, but sometimes it's difficult for me to fully read the cursive English as well. So if you don't learn the hieratic, then it's a completely different script.
When you started, well, for any language, it's interesting how we visualize it. Once we look at a new language, you already knew some Hebrew, probably you'd seen Hebrew writing, so you're familiar with that. So when you're familiar with Hebrew writing, it's like, for me, I used to do shorthand, and I love writing shorthand. I still write sometimes things in shorthand, so nobody will understand.
So. Yes, yeah. I mean, people understand because there are, of course, many Egyptologists who understand hieratic, including Christian and Jen, but I haven't had enough time to learn that yet.
This is just so fascinating so you start studying and then you read the text, and I assume you were rather startled to realize how very modern actually the story is. That fathers were doing the same thing back then.
Yes, yeah, no, it's because it's funny to see how you usually think of a father working in order to try to give his son a better life as something that's relatively modern, but really it's been occurring throughout history. And also at the end of the section, at the end of the book, the story in the wisdom section, he tells his son things like, you should respect people who are more important than you, or you shouldn't eat too much. And I think these are still values that many of these values are things that we still hold today.
Well, this is one of his suggestions. Stay out of trouble.
Stay out of trouble. Yes, yes. Don't, and don't. He also said if you leave school at lunchtime, don't forget to come back in the afternoon because then you'll be berated. Essentially, don't miss class. Don't play hooky.
That's what's so beautiful about something like this. So he says, stay out of trouble, stay away from fighting. If someone picks up a brick, run. And when you testify before a judge, answer him thoughtfully and with deliberation. Now, isn't that nice? I mean, this is
That
a
is
very
very nice.
wise father.
Yes, he is wise. And that's why, I mean, of course, we don't really know. That's why I think that I'm a little bit skeptical of the whole setup here. I don't think he's really a minor because otherwise, I feel like he wouldn't know. Well, first of all, he wouldn't know how to write the story, and then he also wouldn't know. I feel like, actually, that's not true. But I'm just a bit skeptical that he's a minor because otherwise he would be able to write the story because at that point in time, only the scribes knew how to write. It
So you
wasn't like
think
today
this is the
where.
first novel? He was the first novelist. This is a novel.
Yeah, I think it is a novelist. Yes.
So explain the timeline. What are we talking about? Where is he in the timeline? You have a timeline page in there, and
Yes.
compare it
So
to other things.
So the first copies of the text, I think you might not be able to see it there, but they're from around 1500 BCE. But the text might have actually been written earlier because at that point in time, when you wanted to copy text, you just copied it by hand, and so it might have just been a copy of some earlier version of the text that's now lost. But most Egyptologists think it was written sometime around that point, 1500 BC. So that's around 3500 years ago by now, quite a long time. And then you can see on different parts of the timeline. The first hieroglyphs were found around much earlier than that, maybe 3500 BCE, so 2000 years earlier. And then there's various periods of there's the Old Kingdom, which starts around 2200 BCE, and then there's the intermediate period, then the Middle Kingdom, the second intermediate period, then the New Kingdom. The New Kingdom is by far the longest, and so it's quite interesting to see because you can see. I don't know if you can tell there, right above the picture of my book. That's the present. Is a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and that's about when the United States declared independence. You can see that the U.S. has been independent for such a small portion of the period of time compared to, you know, Egypt, compared to like how long Egyptian history has been. So it's quite astounding to see the differences in terms of how much time one has existed versus the other.
Well, it's fascinating. Well, that's the beautiful thing about this book. You have these wonderful, wonderful charts and all of this sort of extra explanation that really takes us into history to understand where everything is sort of placed in history. I love it.
And one thing I'll add is that you can see people don't realize often how long Egyptian history is. They often assume, oh, Egypt is just kind of like, one point in time, like the culture doesn't develop as much. And often I think people get the impression of that because the Egyptian art doesn't really change that much. It stays relatively the same across most of its history. But Cleopatra lived closer to us than the building of the Great Pyramid of King Khufu. And so it's strange to think about that during the time of Cleopatra, the pyramids were as old to her as she is to us.
It is. It's hard. We sort of Hollywood has put it all in movies and meshed it all together, so we think it all happened at the same time.
Same time, yes, yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, to think of it that way. So that's why the book is just so great. No, I have you show there when you say miners, talking about Khety as a miner. So in the book you say miners in Sinai invented the alphabet. So explain the beginning here of the alphabet and
Well,
what you've learned.
well, I guess I wouldn't say they invented the alphabet, but the Egyptian hieroglyphs are sort of the origin for our alphabet, in the sense that Egyptian hieroglyphs actually aren't the earliest writing system. I believe that the cuneiform in Sumer is slightly earlier than Egyptian hieroglyphs, and then also in Mesoamerica, a little bit later, you have a separate writing system originating on its own. But the origin of our alphabet does come from Egyptian hieroglyphs. And you can see that essentially there are these miners in the Sinai, and the Egyptian miners, both Egyptian miners and miners from Canaan. And so essentially, or Phoenician miners. And the Phoenician miners, they couldn't read the Egyptian hieroglyphs, they couldn't understand the language, but they could, because Egyptian hieroglyphs represent everyday objects. And so they could see, they saw the bull's head, and they took those symbols, and they used those symbols to write with their own language, and eventually those symbols simplified. And so you can see the Egyptian hieroglyph, sort of gets simplified to the bull's head in Proto-Sinaitic, and then to Phoenician, where it gets simplified even more and gets sort of turned on and rotated as, people write different languages and different, from right to left or left to right. And then today, it's rotated even more. So if you flip today's A back upside down, then you can see it's a bull's head with two horns coming off on the side, just a little bit.
Yeah.
You can, and you can see it's sort of like a bull's head flipped upside down, which I think is quite fascinating. And you can do this for many other letters. Like, for example, the letter M, that originally came from the Egyptian sign for water. And, it had many more ups and downs in the Egyptian sign, but it eventually got simplified to just our letter M today, which is just, sort of two crests of the wave.
And it is so wonderful that you got interested in this at your age.
I know, I find it really fascinating how the alphabets evolved and things like that. And of course, there's many more steps in between. Like, you can go from Phoenician to Greek to Old Italic to things like that. But it's quite fascinating to see. And they're the origin of lots of different alphabets as well. I believe there's even the alphabets of many Indo-European languages. So even like there's a few Indian alphabets as well that come from Egyptian hieroglyphs. So it's fascinating to see how they all have a common origin.
It is. Now, one of the things that Khety says to his son is, but if you know how to write, and he is correct. If you know, even today, if you know how to write, and if you know how to write well, you don't need Grammarly, actually. You can actually write well. That's unfortunately, it might be a lost art pretty soon. But I love how he's pushing him into the job that he wants him to take.
Yes, yeah, and I especially love how he uses the job of the fisherman at the end, because you might think of the fisherman as a pretty bossless job. The fisherman, all he has to do is catch fish and then he sells it in the market. He has no boss. But Khety sort of turns it on its head, and he says the fisherman does have a boss. The boss is the crocodile. Which I think is quite funny. And then he says, "There's no boss. There's no job that has no boss except for the scribe. The scribe is the boss of everyone else," which of course isn't entirely true, because the scribes still have to, pay their dues to the pharaoh and to the scribes that are more important to them. But still, I don't know. I found that quite interesting, the way that he tries to convince him. And he says that if you're a scribe, then you won't be beaten up, because at that point in time, if you were a farmer and you didn't pay your taxes to the lord whose land you were renting, then you'd be beaten. And many punishments, there wasn't really prison at that time. It was mainly for political prisoners, so the punishments were beating right there and then. And so he says, if you're a scribe, then you'll avoid all this, and you'll have a life free from pain.
I love it. Well, here we have this is one of the pages, the best.
Oh yes, yeah. The best. I think that's a third section or something like that. I like this because he talks about putting on a kilt, and because I never really realized this. When you see people wearing a kilt, when you see people wearing a kilt, it's generally like a more formal dress, and the more clothes someone wore, the more important they were. And so that's why you often see little children in the tomb paintings running around naked. No one really cared about them. But then the pharaoh, he has something covering his chest as well, in addition to his legs.
The illustrations are so great. So you had to obtain the rights to all of this artwork, right?
Actually, so the wonderful thing is that much of it comes from the Met, and the Met allows you to use its images freely without asking for rights. Some of the images, though, from the other museums, we did have to get the rights for. Some of them we had to pay for, actually.
It's beautiful, the selection that you've made. Just that alone is incredible. So let's talk about one of the other jobs that I found interesting.
Oh, sure, yes. So you can see that, I don't know if you can see it, but that big razor, in the foreground there. And that was the razor that was used by, if you see right below it, there's a little golden picture of a woman. And that was the razor that razor belonged to her, which I think is quite fascinating. You have a picture of the woman and you have a razor as well. And it was interesting that barbers at that time, they didn't really have barber shops, but it was more that a barber would go from street to street and he would try to look for customers and he would shave them on the street. And so that's why Khety describes the barber as like a bee, constantly running around and trying to find work to fill his belly. Just like a bee might run around from flower to flower, trying to find honey.
Oh, it's fascinating how you've taken each of these occupations and you've illustrated them and really brought them to life for people to really understand. Since the book came out, when I first spoke to you, the book had just come out. You hadn't even had any other interviews. You hadn't done any book signings or anything. What's happened since the book came out in addition to winning awards?
Well, we've gotten a number of print runs. So I think we're currently on our third print run right now, which is absolutely amazing. And I think that's what I most value more than the awards, but I think, seeing people actually buy the book and appreciate it, that's what really makes me happy. And I've also had a number of my teachers say that I gave a few of my teachers at school a few copies, and they said that they've really some of their kids or their nieces and nephews have really enjoyed the book, which is wonderful to hear.
Have you been thinking about teaching yourself, teaching people how to read hieroglyphs?
Oh, I'm not sure. Well, to be honest, I'd like to get a little bit better at it myself before I begin teaching others. I feel like I need to get an Egyptology degree before I started teaching other people about hieroglyphs.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes young people learn from young people. And even if it's just the beginning ones, sometimes that can spur kids on. I have a feeling most kids would be intimidated by working with an Egyptologist. But if you were teaching, if you just put a little course on your website, I think if you just started with just basic things, I bet kids would love it.
You're right. Maybe I'll consider it. We do have a teacher's guide, but it doesn't teach hieroglyphs. It's more just like a teacher's guide for reading the book. It doesn't go into depth about hieroglyphs.
I think kids seeing a young person enthusiastic like you are, it's not intimidating. I think they will be relaxed about it.
You're right. I'll consider it.
You can make it as a game, put hieroglyphs together as a sort of a little quiz kind of thing at the end. Learn your hieroglyphs, do the translation, tell little stories. Really, I think it would be great because I think young people are looking for more depth. People are starting to get tired of being on this social media all the time. And I think seeing how you are enthusiastic about it, it might instill interest from other kids.
You're right. Yes, and I agree that when a kid teaches something, you automatically feel more engaged than when it's just, an adult, saying something, because you're so used to adults teaching you that when someone your age teaches you something, you're more inclined to pay attention.
I really think you should do it. I think it would be wonderful.
And now you're definitely making me consider it.
Okay. That's what I want to do because I think it would be so much fun. Let's talk about the people you went to, Christian Casey and Jen Thum, and they're real Egyptologists.
Yes.
Tell us
So
about
they
them.
sure. So they both actually were in the same class, Egyptology class together at Brown, and they both received their Egyptology degrees from Brown. And now Christian is at the Freie Universität in Berlin, and Jen is a curator at the Harvard Art Museums. And so they've been absolutely wonderful to work with. And Christian, of course, is the one that taught me hieroglyphs. And after we decided, to embark on this project, he introduced me to Jen as well, and we all started working on it together.
Well, I think that's why when I was thinking about it, I would more likely take a class with you because I would be a little bit intimidated. They're more advanced, and I think sometimes you can learn from somebody knowledgeable like you without being intimidated. So I really think it would be delightful if you did something like that, even on a small scale, and you can maybe have a quiz. You write something in hieroglyphs, and kids have to translate it after they've studied with you a while. There's all sorts of things you can play around with that. And by the way, you've done some book signings already, right?
I've done one actually at the Met.
Oh, they should get you out there and do more, because I think also I'm telling, if your publicist is going to listen to this, I know something big is happening in Egypt in 2027. And what is that?
Well, there's a solar eclipse actually in
Yeah,
2027.
and you should be
Yeah,
there. You have to be there.
I would really like to go. The only problem is it's in the middle of July during the summer.
I've been to deserts in the middle of the summer. It's okay. Believe me. They really should do a document. Your publicist should contact a film company, and they should take you as part of a real trip to Egypt for you to see all the things that you've been reading about.
I'd love to do that. Yes, no, it's true, and because I've never been to Egypt, and so it seems strange that I've written a whole book about Egypt and I've never been. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to go as soon as possible.
yeah. When they do something like this and other kids see it through a young person's eyes, then they take an interest in it, because this book should be in schools. And if you had a section on your website where you're teaching hieroglyphs, where teachers could embrace it and say, let's learn something real. And this is real. It's from a long time ago, but you're bringing it into today. Khety, I think, thanks to this guy who was really smart and had all of this advice, he makes it a modern story. And you can embrace that. I think it would be fun. And this is one of the things perhaps you should put together a little. You see, I'm always full of ideas, but contact a school teacher, and have them put on Be a Scribe Day, where you go and you talk about being a scribe, but kids can like do a little program where they can dress up, the barber, the this and this and this. Do events, have fun. This is a book that kids should get in their hands and have fun with.
I agree. Yeah, that sounds. Like so you see, so you're suggesting that they dress up and
Yeah.
they kind of they almost act out the book in a sense.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what I say.
That's a very fun idea, actually.
It is. It is. So,
It'd be very fun. It'd be very fun to watch, because of course for the fisherman you have to have both the fisherman and the crocodile.
yeah. Oh, I can see that. I can see that. Now, wouldn't that be fun?
That'd be very fun, yes.
So, yeah. And when you do a book signing, you should dress up. I want you to dress up as a scribe. That you make an event of it. This, so much of getting ideas into people's heads, they have to see it, and they have to see it over and over. And so if you embrace the joy of what you've done, you've done something absolutely fantastic. What you've accomplished, I mean, you're right. It's great if you just do it for yourself, but if you actually get it out there for other people to find the joy, and you found the joy, the minute I hear you talking about what you translated, what you did, you're smiling, you're happy. And I would love other kids to feel the same way, to translate that joy in not just from hieroglyphs, but straight into their hearts by really getting out there and doing things like that.
I would love that.
You're going to be going to college next year?
I'm not sure. I'm still thinking through where I'm going to go.
Well, you should go to Oxford, actually. Chicago has a fantastic Egyptology department. But definitely you can put together programs for middle grade schools. This is important. Nowadays, kids need more. They're not learning enough. But any kid who will learn how to read just 10 hieroglyphs, they will be so proud of themselves. I mean, they'll go around showing everybody, I can read a hieroglyph. I can read. Next thing you know, they'll hire you as the ambassador for travel to Egypt because all the young people will learn how to read hieroglyphs and they'll have to go to Egypt. Wouldn't that be exciting to sort of start a movement?
It would be, yes. I don't know. I'm not sure how successful it would be.
Well, when you have a publicist can make anything happen. And that's why I think it starts with a documentary. So that's why that's why I keep saying it, because that way I know your publicist is going to watch this and get the idea. What a wonderful thing. I'd like to see something like this on Netflix. I can see it. Michael the scribe getting on a jet plane, flying back in time as he goes to Egypt. And your jeans, and for our documentary, you better wear a Yankee shirt. And you're going to get on a jet here. And when you get off on the other side, you come off the plane, and there you are, Michael, the scribe, dressed as an Egyptian scribe. And you step off that jet plane, and you are now back in time. You see, I can direct this whole documentary. The book is wonderful. I want to get it in more people's hands. It's a fantastic book. And as I always tell people, if they don't know a kid, they can buy one and send it to a hospital. But of course, anybody who buys this book, you have to keep one for yourself because there's so much in this book. Let's talk for a minute about words from ancient Egypt.
Oh, sure, yes. So you can see, I mean, there aren't many. There aren't many. Unlike Latin and ancient Greek, there aren't many English words from ancient Egyptian. But some of them, like for example, the word brick, that comes from the Egyptian word debet, which also means brick. And many of these other words, paper from papyrus, and many of these other words are also come from ancient Egyptian words. Some of them are pretty obvious, like of course, oasis. It's there aren't many. Oasis is a pretty distinctively desert-like feature. Or gum. It comes from a word that, because they're acacia trees, there's gum inside of them, and so it comes from the Egyptian word that refers to the sap of the acacia trees, which I think is quite fascinating. And I like that little gumball machine you have down there.
Well, that way people will remember that back then the Egyptians were chewing gum. So it's all of these little things that help people. I think the more you know, the more ideas you have in your head, the better. And this is a perfect oasis. I can see you, Michael the scribe, coming in on your camel. You get off your camel, and there you are sitting in your oasis being a scribe, right?
We're writing on papyrus.
That's it, writing on papyrus. So are you good at writing hieroglyphs too?
No, not really.
Not yet.
I really should start practicing that actually, but I don't practice it much. And well, the thing about it is that it's hard. Usually, Egyptian hieroglyphs weren't really written on papyrus or on paper. They were carved into the walls, but it was hieratic that was written on paper, on papyrus. I mean, I should learn hieratic first, and then I'll start writing on papyrus.
When I was young, I learned how to write Chinese from a Chinese girl. She taught me how to write Chinese letters, and it was fun. And I still can write a few Chinese letters. That's what I mean about when you learn these things young, they stay with you. Just the fun of learning. I see a lot ahead for you. Are you working on another book?
I am thinking about starting another book, yes. A lot like Be a Scribe, but it would be about a bit different text. You'd still have the same kind of images and the same insets surrounding the text, but the topic would be slightly different. I think it would be about a story about a man whose money is stolen. I don't want to reveal any more, though.
Yeah, no, don't. You'll surprise me, and you'll be back here with the next book release. But you've accomplished something, Michael. It's so impressive, and
thank you.
And I think it's inspirational, really, for everybody. Older people will say, "My goodness, look at the work that went into this book. This was not easy. You have such a good eye for presentation, of finding the right layout and getting everything right and thinking about the things that you wanted to include in this story. This is a major accomplishment."
Thank you.
Well, as I say, I recommend it always for people to buy as a gift. It's the perfect gift for anyone. So you're going to graduate in May?
In June, yes. No,
In
it's my
June?
last year.
Wow. It's amazing. Not many kids graduate from high school having already published. I don't know how many books you've sold, but I know if you were in the third printing, a lot. And there's going to be a lot more printings. The more you get out there, and it's good that you're doing another round of interviews, you have to keep it up because in this book world, this is one thing you'll learn in the publishing business. Generally, books come out and they have a short window of opportunity to promote them, but you have to keep coming out. Just do a little mini class. That's something else to advertise your book and get people interested. You can come back here every 6 months and we can talk about different parts of the book because I love it. I just love it.
Thank you.
Your parents must be so very proud, and everybody. So
They
what?
are, yes.
Yeah, you're just so sweet. I want to see more people out there reading this book, and they can check out your website right now. It's beascribe.com, right? And what do you have on your website?
There's a variety of links to, Amazon or Waterstones, and then there's also some just descriptive information about the book.
Are there many places that teach hieroglyphs? Maybe you can put it on your website and start teaching. And one of the things, if you teach, you always learn more as you teach.
That is very true. That's something that I've always noticed that for any subject.
Exactly. If you have to teach a subject, there's something in you that just spurs you along to learn more so you can stay ahead of your students.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm very, very happy that you are on Joy on Paper today. So,
It
again,
was wonderful to be here.
you're a joy. It's just I get such a kick out of you. So, Michael Hoffen, thank you so much, and thank you for joining me. And you'll be back. I hope you come back in 6 months. Think of something else we can talk about.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bye bye now. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
It's so nice to talk to you.
Wow. Oh, it's so good to talk to Michael Hoffen again. Wonderful, wonderful book. Be a Scribe. It's a perfect gift. And I love talking to authors about all of their books. So please just subscribe to Joy on Paper Live so that I can bring you more interviews with fascinating authors. And nobody is more fascinating than Michael Hoffen. Please subscribe. Just click that button. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. Bye bye now.